Generic goblin noise. Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Also, I want to bring to your attention the Kickstarter from Original Magic Art, where they're trying to get some sweet Commander/EDH generals onto playmats. He's directly working with the artists, so you'll be able to help support them, and if you use the affiliate link below, you'll also be able to help support me and get your hands on some of these sweet playmats. So before we begin, a special congratulations to Alexander Kinney. He won the Guilds of Ravnica box, and I hope he got some great pulls. In this week's video, I am taking out my new/old Mistform Ultimus, which I say because I have it on MTGO, but this is the first time I've played it in paper. I keep 2 islands, Thought Vessel, Long-Term Plans, Master of the Pearl Trident, Bident of Thassa, and a Soul Ring. Josh is playing his Zedruu deck and keeps Strip Mine, Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus, Aftershock, Crucible of Worlds, and Dwarven Miner. Kevin is taking his new Sai Master Thopterus deck out, keeping an island, an Aetherflux Reservoir, Trading Post, Ghost Quarter, Arcane Denial, Whir of Invention, and Thopter Assembly. Lastly, Fred is playing his Zedruu deck and keeps an island, Mystic Remora, Consulate Crackdown, Mountain, Replenish, and Karmic Justice. Fred wins the die roll, and he starts us off. Fred plays an island, and he passes. Josh plays a snow-covered mountain, and passes. I play an island, and I cast Soul Ring. Kevin plays an island as well, and he passes. Fred plays a mountain, and casts Mystic Remora. Josh drops a Strip Mine, and he casts a Dwarven Miner. I play an island, and I cast Master of the Pearl Trident. Kevin plays an island, and he passes turn. Fred pays for his Remora cumulative upkeep, and he plays a Plains before passing turn. Josh casts the Lightning Greaves in his main phase, and is unable to pay the 4 colorless for the Mystic Remora. This lets Fred draw from the Remora trigger, and Josh then gears up his Miner, and he passes. I play an island, and I cast Bident of Thassa. Fred draws, and moving to combat, I swing the Master at Kevin for 2. With the Master connecting, I get to draw from my Bident trigger, and I pass to Kevin. Kevin plays a Ghost Quarter, and he casts Sai before passing to Fred. On Fred's upkeep, he pays 2 for the Remora trigger this time, and he plays another Mountain in his main phase. Fred then casts a Thought Vessel, and he passes turn. Josh plays another snow-covered mountain for his land for turn, and we see a Crucible of Worlds come out, oh no. He can't pay the 4, and Fred draws a card. Moving to combat, Josh hits Fred for 1 with his Miner, and he passes to me. I play an island for my turn, and I bring out the Mistform Ultimus. Moving to combat, the Master heads toward Fred this time for 2, and upon connecting, gives me a card from the Bident trigger. Kevin casts an Ichor Wellspring, getting a 1/1 Flying Thopter from his side trigger, and then draws it enters. Fred also draws, and Kevin plays a Maze of Ith as his land for turn, and passes. Fred doesn't pay for the upkeep cost of his Remora trigger, and he lets it go to the graveyard. He plays a tapped Sacred Foundry as his land for turn, and he moves to cast a Gilded Lotus. I don't want Fred to ramp that aggressively, so I counter it with a counterspell, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Josh plays another snow-covered mountain for his turn, and he brings out Zedruu. I play an island for my turn, and I take 2 damage from Zedruu. I then cast a Grand Architect on my first main phase, and tap it to make 2 colorless which can only be spent on artifacts, and I cast my own copy of Thought Vessel. I follow this by casting a clone, and have it come in as a copy of the Master of the Pearl Trident. Moving to combat, the Mistform goes at Josh for 5, while the Master hits Fred for 3. I then draw 2 cards from the Bident triggers, and I pass to Kevin. Kevin sacrifices his Thopter and Ichor Wellspring to Sai's ability, drawing both from the ability and from the Wellspring going to the graveyard. Kevin then casts a Lotus Petal, which nets him another Thopter from Sai, and, moving to combat, he hits Fred for 1 with his Commander. Moving to the end of his turn, Kevin then discards down to 7. Fred casts a Karmic Justice in his main phase, and with the spell in the stack, Josh sacrifices his Strip Mine to blow up Fred's Sacred Foundry. Fred then casts a Ghostly Prison, and he passes to Josh. Josh plays his Strip Mine as his land for turn from his graveyard, and he takes 2 from Zedruu. He then pays 4 to cast a Thran Dynamo, and taps the Dynamo to cast a Darksteel Ingot. He then passes to me. I cast an Arcane Adaptation in my main phase, and I name Wizards as it comes in. Moving to combat, I swing my 2 Masters of the Pearl Trident, and Mistform at Josh for 14, 6 of which is Commander. I then draw 3 cards from the Bident of Thassa triggers, and I pass. Kevin draws and plays a Shiny Island before casting Urgolem's Eye, which gives him another Thopter thanks to Sai. He then swings a Thopter at Josh for 1, and he passes. At the end of Kevin's turn, I wizard cycle away my Vedalken Aether Mage, which will let me go find a wizard, which, thanks to Arcane Adaptation, is pretty much any creature in my library. I go and grab Galecaster Colossus anyway, so it's not super relevant, just a fun fact. Fred casts an Oath of Teferi in his main phase, and he exiles his planes until end of turn. He passes, and the planes comes back untapped, but it does have him taking 2 because of Zozu. Josh throws down the Gauntlet in his main phase with a Heartless Hidetsugu, and he moves to equip the Lightning Greaves onto it. Fred sees his chance and uses Path to Exile to deal with the Hidetsugu, and Josh doesn't search for a land once his creature is exiled. Moving to combat, he taps his Dynamo to pay for Ghostly Prison, and he hits Fred for 2 with Zozu. I play an island for my turn, and I take 2. I then pay 7 to cast a Galecaster Colossus, but Kevin counters it with an Arcane Denial after he sacrifices his Lotus Petal for a blue mana. Moving to combat, I swing Mistform and 2 Masters at Kevin, and Kevin untaps a Mistform with his Maze. He still does take 8 though, and I get to draw 2 cards. I draw 2 on Kevin's upkeep while he draws 1, and then draws for turn. He then takes 2 while paying the Phyrexian mana cost of Phyrexian Metamorph, gaining a Thopter as it comes in, and he has it come in as a copy of Thran Dynamo. He then taps his newly made Dynamo to cast an Ashnod's Altar, gaining another Thopter token. He sacrifices his 2 newly made Thopters to pay for Trading Post, which has him make another Thopter on cast from Sai's ability. Fred casts an Izzet Locket in his main phase, and he pays 3 to cast Rhystic Study. He then passes to Josh. Josh casts a Gilded Lotus in his main phase and pays 1 more for the study tax. He then passes to me. I tap out in my main phase to cast a Kicked Rite of Replication, targeting my Master of Pearl Trident. Sadly, Kevin calls the Fun Police and puts a stop to it with Negate. I swing everything at Kevin once more, who again untaps my Mistform and takes 8 from the Masters. I then draw 2 cards, and I play an island in my second main phase, taking 2 from Zozu. I then tap my Mistform Ultimus and Grand Architect to help cast Hedron Archive, and I pass turn. At the end of my turn, Kevin sacrifices one of his Thopters to Trading Post, bringing back the Wellspring to his hand. Kevin casts a Mox Amber in his main phase, gaining a Thopter, and recasts the Ichor Wellspring, gaining a second Thopter, and drawing once it enters. He then drops a Psychosis Crawler, gaining his third Thopter for the turn, and Fred asks Kevin if he pays 1 for it, which Kevin doesn't, and Fred draws. Kevin then sacrifices the Thopter and the Wellspring to Sai's second ability, drawing for it, and the Wellspring's on Death Trigger. Fred, Josh, and I take 1 for each of the cards Kevin's drawn, thanks to the Psychosis Crawler, and Kevin then sacrifices a Thopter to pay for the cost of Voltaic Key, which replaces the Thopter he just lost. He then activates the key to untap the Thran Dynamo, and he taps the Dynamo and sacrifices another Thopter to cast an Aetherflux Reservoir, and he gains another Thopter. With nothing else, Kevin passes turn. Fred pays 2 life to have his Hollowed Fountain come into play untapped, and he then loses 2 more from Zozu. He then pays 5 mana to cast a Consulate Crackdown, and Josh and I don't respond, but Kevin is ready for it with a counterspell of his own. He gains 1 life from the Reservoir, but doesn't pay the 1 from the study tax, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Josh draws for turn and passes, and at the end of his turn, I flash in Scion of Una. I draw for turn, and I play a Rogue's Passage, taking 2 from Zozu. I ask for life totals, and Kevin pleads with me to let him have 1 more turn, promising that he doesn't have a Cyclonic Rift in hand. I take Kevin for his word, and I swing the Masters and Mistform at Fred, dealing 15 points of damage, 7 of which is Commander. With the draw triggers on the stack, I cast Long-Term Plans, paying the tax cost to go and find a card and put it third from the top, and I then draw 3. In my second main phase, I tap the Grand Architect and the Scion, plus 1 island for the tax study trigger, to cast my own Thran Dynamo, and I then pass to Kevin, who, at the end of my turn, sacrifices the Thopter to his Trading Post, and he brings back his Ichor Wellspring to hand. Kevin draws for turn, and casts his Ichor Wellspring, gaining 1 life, drawing a card, and gaining a Thopter token, and he deals 1 to all of his opponents. He then plays an island, and takes 2 from Zozu's ability. Kevin then sacrifices his Wellspring to the Trading Post, drawing 2 cards again, and dealing 2 to his opponents. He then casts an Ethereum Sculptor, gaining another Thopter, and gains 2 life. He recasts his Lotus Petal, which he returned earlier, gaining 3 life, and another Thopter token. Kevin then sacrifices 2 Thopters to pay for the cost of Vedalken Orrery, and he gains 4 life and another Thopter. And I should note that Fred has been drawing for each of these spells. Kevin then sacrifices the Vedalken Orrery and the Thopter to Sai to draw a card, and Psychosis Crawler's ability goes on the stack. I respond to it with a Rapid Hybridization, blowing it up, and giving Kevin a 3/3 green creature. We then resolve the trigger, and all of Kevin's opponents take 1. Kevin then casts Copy Artifact, and has it come in as a copy of Gilded Lotus, and he gains 5 more life. He taps it for blue and sacrifices a Thopter and the Mox Amber to draw another card with the Sai's ability. Kevin then casts a Whir of Invention, tapping some of his artifacts to help pay for it, where X is 3, and he gains 6 life. Fred is concerned by this as Kevin's gained a ton of life and done a great deal with his mirror board, so he counters it with a Pact of Negation. Kevin then passes, and Josh sees his chance to take someone out at this point. He pays for the activated ability of Dwarven Miner to blow up Fred's Hollowed Fountain. This triggers Fred's Karmic Justice, and Fred uses it to target the Crucible of Worlds. With Fred's target on the stack, Josh sacrifices his Strip Mine to go and blow up Fred's island, and with it being destroyed, Fred blows up Josh's Gilded Lotus. Fred untaps for his turn, and unable to pay for the delayed cost of Pact of Negation, loses the game. Josh draws for turn and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, losing 2 life, and he passes to me. I play an island, and I lose 2 life from Zedruu. I then tap 5 to cast a Zami Lady of Scrolls, and it resolves. I tap my Grand Architect, who is now also a wizard because of Arcane Adaptation, drawing a card. I then tap the Scion, drawing from Azami's ability, and then Azami herself, drawing once more. Moving to combat, I swing everything that remains at Kevin, and he untaps my Mistform, which technically he shouldn't have been able to do because of Scion of the Una grants Shroud. Unfortunately we missed this though, and Kevin only takes 8. I then tap the Mistform and my Thought Vessel to cast an Adaptive Automaton and name wizards as it comes in. I then tap the Automaton and another island to cast a Mirage Mirror. With nothing else, I pass to Kevin. Kevin plays a Buried Ruin as his land for turn, and he takes 2. He then taps his Voltaic Key and out the Trading Post, #CheatCount1, to sacrifice a Thopter and return his Ichor Wellspring to hand. Kevin then recasts it, gaining 1 life, a Thopter, and drawing as it enters. He then casts a Clock of Omen, gaining 2 life and another Thopter. At this point, Kevin realizes part of his mistake, and he taps his Trading Post. He then taps 2 Thopters to untap it with Clock of Omen, and he sacrifices the Wellspring once more to Trading Post to draw 2 cards. Kevin then taps the Clock and the Sculptor to untap Trading Post once more, and taps it, sacrificing a Thopter to bring the Wellspring back. Kevin recasts the Wellspring, drawing a card and gaining a Thopter, and gaining 3 more life. We then see the Reservoir and Wellspring tapped to untap the Trading Post, and he sacrifices the Wellspring again to draw more. Kevin then casts a Crystal Shard, gaining 4 life and another Thopter, and he then taps the Shard and Ashnod's Altar to untap the Trading Post, and sacrifices a Thopter to the post to bring back his favorite Wellspring. He then sacrifices a Thopter to Ashnod's Altar for 2 colorless, and he recasts the Wellspring, drawing a card, gaining 5 life, and gains a Thopter. We're all a bit concerned, so I sacrifice my Hedron Archive in response to his draw triggers and draw 2. Kevin then taps 2 artifacts to untap his Trading Post once more, and taps it to sacrifice the Wellspring again. With the draw on the stack, I have my Mirage Mirror become a copy of one of the Masters, and tap it to draw with Azami's ability. Kevin then casts a Fabricate, gaining 6 life, and goes to find an artifact. He grabs a Mana Vault, and he casts it, gaining 7 life and a Thopter token. Kevin then taps it and floats 3, and he sacrifices the Thopter and the Vault to draw with Sai's ability. At this point he is more than enough, and he dumps 50 life into the Reservoir's ability to take me out. With the trigger on the stack, I cast Fact or Fiction to find an answer, giving Josh the 5 cards, and he gives me a pile of 5 and 0. I don't have an answer though, and I die. Kevin's now low at life, and I jokingly say that he's going to die to Josh. I am sadly very wrong, and to save myself a good chunk of time editing, I'll leave it in uncut but fast forward it. And needless to say, Kevin proves me very wrong in 4 minutes, casting a series of spells to get himself back up to over 50 life, and he takes out Josh with a Reservoir as well. Game review time. So, this taught me the valuable lesson that no matter what Kevin says or what he promises, never listen to him because he's always going to win unless we take him out first. That's probably an over-exaggeration, and I'm really happy that he was able to win after coming back from such a really slow start. I thought it was a real treat to be able to see him work through his lines of play, to go from very low life to basically having 100 life in 2 turns. I know that a lot of people feel that Paradox Engine is probably one of the strongest artifacts out of that block, but I definitely think Aetherflux Reservoir is up there. We had to focus down Fred early on because a lot of his enchantments and spells basically lock us out of the game. His Zedruu deck is a lot like mine, but he runs more donation type spells, which were punishing in the long run. Unfortunately for Josh, he wasn't able to capitalize on the combo of Crucible of Worlds and Strip Mine because he was so far behind in lands. Had he been able to draw a few more cards that could have helped him bring everyone down to his level, I think it would have been a much more interesting game for him, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Mistform Ultimus performed quite well, and I do think I had a few issues with sequencing, but otherwise I was really happy with the deck. I do wish I'd been able to find Cavern of Souls so I could have at least resolved the Galecaster Colossus, or another counterspell so I could have fought through the Rite of Replication, but unfortunately that's the way the cookie crumbles. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.